Jobs, what's hot, what's not? What will Nebraska workers be doing in the future? And are we getting them ready for these growing, even new professions? We'll talk about this today on Speaking of Nebraska. Welcome to Speaking of Nebraska. I'm Mike Tobias. We're here to talk about important issues facing our state, plus an update on the Nebraska legislature and a bit of Nebraska history. Today, we're talking about what Nebraskans do for a living and what they might be doing in the decades to come. When it comes to our workforce, a lot is changing. Automation impacts factory jobs, online shopping impacts retail jobs. Before we dive into our mostly forward-looking discussion, a little background on where we are now. About 1 million Nebraskans comprise the state's labor force. It's worth noting that our unemployment rate is 2.7%. That's lower than the national rate and has been for all of this century, often quite a bit lower. What are we doing? Well, healthcare employs about 140,000 Nebraskans. Another 100,000 or so work in retail. Manufacturing, education, hotels, and restaurants are also some of our highest employment industries. And who are we working for? Well, the state of Nebraska is our largest employer. Offutt Air Force Base, the University of Nebraska, the trucking transportation company Werner Enterprises, Allegiant Health CHI, and Tyson Foods also employ more than 10,000 people. Walmart, Hy-Vee, public school systems, city governments, and banks are among those a little further down the list. Well, joining us now to talk about all things job-related are Phil Baker, Research Administrator with the Nebraska Department of Labor, and Eric Thompson. He's a University of Nebraska-Lincoln economist and Director of the university's Bureau of Business Research. Thanks for joining us. So we've got a lot to talk about. At first, I want to touch on a couple of things that we saw before in some of those graphics there. First of all, unemployment. In terms of job growth in Nebraska, why is it important that we know this, and what can we take away from that?
For the unemployment, it's good for, well, it's not good, but it's good for us to know that what people are unemployed, what their background's been, so we can help them get back to work and bring them back off the rolls. And then, of course, our employment side, we like to look at where some of the causes for shifts in the employment might be based upon some of those unemployment numbers, and that helps us predict where we think growth is going to happen down the road.
Low unemployment, good, bad for job growth in the state?
Well, it can restrict job growth somewhat. Obviously, a low unemployment rate in part reflects that there's not a lot of slack in the labor market, and that there's relatively few typically employed workers who are out there and available to join a new job. On the other hand, I think it's a big positive signal about our labor market. Nebraska typically has lower unemployment rates than most other states in good times and bad times for the U.S. economy. And I think that's a signal of about the quality of our labor force. We have the type of workers that employers find a way to keep, and if they're out of work, don't stay out of work for long, because they're educated and they have good work histories.
So when we look at some of those areas that are high employment, areas, in Nebraska, how's that kind of changed over the years?
Well, I think there's been obviously one of the biggest areas right now, or for the past several years, has been health. Mm-hmm. And as the population has aged, we've seen the occupations in health expand. And then we've seen some of the areas that have shown some decline are areas that occupations that had a lot of repetitive work, that can be taken over by machines,
right.
Kind of
traditional manufacturing, yes, and factory
yes.
jobs, essentially, is those sorts of things.
Right.
Yeah.
And that routine type work that is subject to automation also is found in service sectors, some occupations there. Some administrative and secretarial functions also have succumbed to automation. So it is concentrated in your manufacturing production workers, but we've also seen some occupations going away throughout the economy. And again, if work is routine and repetitive, there may be opportunities for automation to replace some of those employment opportunities throughout the economy.
So what happens to those jobs then? Are there other opportunities that then spring up as a result of the loss of those kind of repetitive, traditional factory type jobs?
Well, we've seen some of that middle class employment in factory jobs and then some of the other jobs we've talked about. As that's gone away, we've seen something of a bifurcation of those workers, with some workers retraining or otherwise finding new employment in higher skill occupations, and then some of those workers being reemployed, but perhaps in lower skill occupations, since the skill they've learned over their lifetime is no longer in demand. So it's kind of a split outcome.
And I know when we've talked before, you mentioned the notion of can traditional, again, manufacturing line workers, I think it was the term, adapt to maybe some of these new positions that involve running or repairing or making robots?
Yes, we do. We have programs that work with the employers that help them retrain some of their workers when they get new machines and those types of things come in. We can help them with that at the Department of Labor to try and retrain on some of those, and we're able to do that, which gets to some of that, getting the people off that lost their jobs were going away to be able to stay, because as was mentioned, we have a low unemployment rate, so we need to retrain as much as we can.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is there's always a lot of dynamism in the workforce. So people move away for various reasons, people retire. So sometimes even if workers aren't able to change occupations, when their position goes away, if over time they wait it out, they may find new employment in that same occupation. So part of the reason that employment shrinks in some of those occupations is that fewer young people are joining the occupation.
Right.
Because sometimes existing workers are able to find new employment in the same type of work.
And in the manufacturing sector, that's a little bit of a concern right now, is how do you get young people interested in these sorts of careers?
Yes. What I know that the Nebraska Manufacturers Association has been working to try and show high school students that manufacturing's not like it used to be.
Right.
It's a lot cleaner. You come in, they're actually working with computers and machines more so now than they were doing repetitive
Much
work.
more of a tech-driven career than maybe it might have been a generation earlier. So,
Yes.
Yeah. I want to talk broadly about what are sort of hot occupations in the state right now. What are those things that we're seeing a lot of interest in and a lot of growth in?
Well, as a general matter, I think it's occupations where there's a lot of skill in terms of education content, people who need college degrees. There's also a lot of opportunity for skilled production workers. That obviously, some of those folks are also college and community college graduates. And then looking across industries, healthcare, services are among the faster growing industries.
Yeah. And I know there's a measure that you use at the Department of Labor. It's something called H3. These are high demand, which means lots of openings, and high growth rate, high skill, which is at least a high school degree, and sometimes a college and more, and then high wage. We've got a list of some of these right now, and when I see this, some of this surprises me. I see everything from truck drivers to nurses, electricians, software developers. That's not a surprise. So talk a little bit about the H3 occupations and what this means.
All right. Yeah. Well, we take, as you mentioned, you gave those kind of definitions. And what we're seeing is there's a real need for electricians, and it used to be electricians maybe weren't paid as much, but now that's a very good occupation, very good technical occupation, along with carpenters is another one, because construction's growing, and that's an area that we see. Plumbing is another area and pipe fitting is another area that's, there's a lot of growth. And Nebraska, especially maybe more in the metropolitan areas, but there's been a lot of recent construction of fairly large buildings, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And also then maintenance mechanics, because as these companies retool and have higher tech machines in them, they need people to be able to come in and keep those running.
And is this, if we were to look at this list and compare it to what other states might see, what stands out? What's different about Nebraska?
Well, Nebraska may have a little bit more in the health area growing because we're a state that does have a little bit of higher age population. So as they start going out of the employment area and into needing more health, that's needed. Also, the area of we have, because of our agriculture background, we also have a lot of businesses that have agriculture employment, and so there's need for people that come in, agricultural mechanics that know how to work on that type of stuff.
And Eric Thompson, recently you did a presentation for the Bureau of Business Research, which you're director of, on producer services jobs. So what are these? And this is a growth area nationally, but maybe not as much in Nebraska.
Yes, so producer services are businesses whose primary customers are other businesses, and includes a lot of more technically oriented occupations such as information technology, computer system design, architects, engineers, consultants, accountants, even lawyers are in this field. So it's a pretty broad part of the economy that certainly nationally is growing very quickly, and it also offers a lot of high wage employment. So I would argue producer services is sort of the leading source of high wage job growth in the economy right now. So Nebraska has a good presence in this industry, but if you look across the board in each of those industries I talked about, we seem to have less employment as a share of our population and our overall employment than the United States overall. So maybe about 7 jobs here in Nebraska for 10 jobs around the country. We're about 30% behind. And it's not improving. In fact, we've grown a little more slowly in this industry than the nation in recent years. So that's one opportunity for us. If we could close that gap with the nation and see really rapid growth in these producer services industries, it could create a lot of new high-wage jobs, could help us retain young people, especially college-aged young people. I think it's an important opportunity for our state's economy.
Why are we lagging behind in that?
Well, there's some evidence that these industries tend to concentrate in larger metropolitan areas. But of course, Omaha is becoming quite a large metropolitan area. Lincoln is certainly a mid-sized metropolitan area. So, I don't think it's entirely the rural nature, or relatively rural nature of our state. It's just not clear to me why we lag behind. It could be related to our traditional focus on goods-producing industries. It could be related to the fact that we've been having trouble retaining college graduates. Could be, our location more in the middle of the country rather than on the east and west coast where there might be higher demand for these services. But it's a challenge that would benefit us to solve.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about traditional retail. If you go into any mall over the holidays to do your shopping, it's pretty obvious that there aren't as many people in a lot of these stores. We've seen in Nebraska, we've seen retailers like Kmart and Shopko close stores in the state, and online shopping does continue to grow. At the same time, we also see Walmart employs almost 10,000 Nebraskans. So, Phil Baker with the Nebraska Department of Labor, what do you see as kind of the future of retail jobs in the state, and where is this going?
Well, I think what we've seen, as you mentioned, when you go to checkout stands, a lot of them now have it self-checkout, and so you're seeing a little bit more of that. Probably where they'll still see some growth or some employment levels pretty stable would be the stocking of the shelves. It's going to be hard to say how, say that like the Amazons are going to affect this. Eric probably knows a little bit, has a little bit more information on that. But since it's a lot of part-time jobs, the numbers don't necessarily shrink real fast because they just shorten hours. So you still have, so in some cases you still have some of the same numbers.
Yeah, and I know at one point we were talking, and you were saying, you know, where you might see the growth is these sort of experiential retail sort of environments.
Yeah, exactly. As big box stores, online shopping, automation reduce at least somewhat the need for employees in the retail sector, you might see growth in retail in experiential shopping or shopping in specialty stores where it's hard for a big box store or online to sort of recreate that experience.
Yeah.
So it might sort of change the job of a significant share of retail employees where they're really selling things that they're very familiar with or are important to them in their own lives because that expertise is what connects with shoppers and would facilitate sales for items that might be more expensive and so forth.
Yeah. There's always a lot of talk about where jobs are going and are we losing jobs overseas. Is Nebraska losing jobs to other countries?
Yeah, I think at the same time, year after year, we're both losing jobs to other countries and gaining jobs from sales to other countries. That's part of our dynamic economy and labor market. I think it's a process where Nebraska benefits as much as it loses. And in a sense, we benefit from both because often, obviously, the job opportunities where we export are sometimes higher paying job opportunities. And when we import more, often we're getting products at a lower cost, which raises the standard of living.
Yeah. Touched on this briefly earlier, but a little bit of a concern about a number of retirements coming in the next decade and how the workforce is going to both fill those positions but possibly opportunities that may exist because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is an area that we've tried to take a look at to find out how employers what their concerns are, and there are some concerns out there about employers about the number of people that are starting to retire, and being able to get the workforce coming up below them. So I think you're seeing though a lot of in the education system starting to work with employers a little bit more, and we might be bringing back a little bit more technology into the school systems that will help people diversify. Students understand what's out there and diversify a little bit when they come out.
Yeah. There's a number, go ahead, Eric.
Oh, well, one thing that could end up surprising us too is that, you know, with the general level of health having improved in our society, with people, you know, wanting to continue to build their savings or, you know, be able to give money to their children and grandchildren, we may see people choosing to work longer, not necessarily because they must, but because they want to.
So we've got just about a minute left. I'd kind of like to get your final thoughts on what you see. Look into the crystal ball and tell me what you see in the next couple of decades job-wise in Nebraska. I'll start with you, Phil.
All right. Well, I think we'll continue to see the growth in the tech jobs, and I think we'll start seeing the education system working a little bit more with the businesses as we go out to help spur that along.
Okay, Eric?
I think it's going to be a challenging environment and a rewarding environment. So because of technology, because of competition, there is going to be increased pressure on all of us at work. On the other hand, I think you know, those who are fortunate or skilled or hardworking and are able to take advantage of the changing economy, sort of become the masters of technology, the rewards could be quite strong. So, you know, I think all of us in managing our careers should focus on being in that group of people.
Lots of opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric Thompson from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Bureau of Business Research and Phil Baker from the Nebraska Department of Labor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, here are some other stories NET News is working on. Grant Gerlach talks to a Kearney couple who received a federal loan to grow their t-shirt business. The White House recently proposed cutting that loan program. This week, Grant reports on why there's uncertainty among rural advocates about how the White House is approaching rural development. Brandon McDermott talks with a University of Nebraska-Lincoln researcher who's helping design a smart bandage that could eventually heal chronic wounds on battlefield injuries. That story next Wednesday. And law school can be a real challenge, but a certain specialty asks students to speculate about cases that may not be taken to court for another century. Next Friday, listen as Bill Kelly follows a team of Nebraska space law students preparing for a courtroom competition involving cyber warfare and the race to colonize Mars. You can listen to all of our signature stories on NET Radio or at netnebraska.org/news and connect with NET News and our journalists on Facebook and Twitter. Well, Nebraska lawmakers were talking about opioids this week, and a very personal story of their impact was part of that. Sarah Howard told fellow senators about her sister. A series of car accidents and back surgeries left Carrie Howard in pain. Doctors prescribed OxyContin. Sarah Howard displayed Carrie's pill bottles to show what Carrie was taking before she died of an opioid overdose in 2009.
In the last 5 months of her life, Carrie was given over 4,500 narcotic pills, almost 1,000 a month, and she didn't make it through her last month. It is jarring to know that that was what went to one human being for the last 5 months of her life.
Well, state government reporter Fred Knapp joins us now to talk more about what Howard is proposing related to opioids.
I should tell you, I took that photo. She had the display of those bottles in her office on a table. It was really remarkable.
Right.
What she's proposing is to limit the length of a prescription for people under 18 for opioids to an initial 7 days. There are exceptions for people with cancer and other complications. But in addition to that, there are parts of the bill that would require people to show IDs when they pick up prescriptions and require doctors to talk about the risks of addictions and overdoses.
Was that a bit of a remarkable moment in the sense that you don't often see something personalized to the level that was?
Absolutely, and her mom, former State Senator Gwen Howard, was in office at the time, and Sarah Howard said that all 49 members of the legislature at the time and the governor had all attended her sister's funeral.
Yeah. So in terms of opioid legislation, you know, we've been talking about the issue for a number of years. Is this really maybe the first kind of big push towards doing something in Nebraska, or have we seen some other pieces of legislation?
No, there have been. I mean, Senator Gwen Howard in about 2011 got the first prescription drug monitoring program where people would go onto a database and be able to see oh, this person had gotten a prescription somewhere else, so we, you know, that's, you keep a control on it that way. Yeah. But according to Sarah Howard, Nebraska is now one of the toughest places for people who are trying to abuse this.
Yeah. And this week, finally, some good news, maybe related to the state's budget, and this came from the Economic Forecasting Board.
Right. They met and revised their forecast for how much the state's going to collect in taxes, and they raised it by $25 million for the current fiscal year and $30 million for the next fiscal year. And so that gives the Appropriations Committee a little breathing room for how they shape the budget that's going to be proposed in the coming days.
And you saw in some of the reaction, uncertainty about how much to make of this, because there's still some questions about the impact of federal tax law changes and what it means in terms of the money we're bringing in.
Right, and Tax Commissioner Tony Fulton is chief among the people urging caution there, because he says we're not really going to know until April when people file their income taxes and get their refunds, you know. And Governor Pete Ricketts is saying we also need to wait until the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, to really have a good handle on this.
And there was also some discussion about possibly, reducing some of the budget cut impact that the University of Nebraska system is going to feel.
Yeah, the Appropriations Committee has changed its recommendation from what was originally proposed to be a 4% cut next year to the university and other institutions of higher education to a 1% cut. And that was sort of contingent on what the Forecast Board did, but the Forecast Board gave them that room. Yeah. So that's where things stand right now.
Another piece of legislation that you reported on this week, the state's 3 most populated counties require lawyers to be appointed to represent juveniles in court. One senator still wants to expand that statewide. Explain that.
Well, right. Senator Patty Pansing Brooks got the 3 largest counties under this rubric a couple of years ago. Now she wants to extend it statewide. You're always entitled to a lawyer. But right now, the way it works, you go to court and the judge asks you. What she would do is have the lawyer appointed so that he or she would be with you at your first court appearance. This is being met with resistance from outstate senators who say, no, we like the way we handle it now. So she has to convince the speaker she has enough votes to bring it back up, which she says she does.
And in campaign news, as we record right now, there's a few hours left in the deadline to file for the 2018 primary. We've got 11 candidates for U.S. Senate, 11 candidates for 3 House seats, 5 candidates for governor. One of those for governor is Bob Christ, who survived a challenge this week. Can you briefly talk about that?
Right. One of his Democratic primary opponents for governor, Tyler Davis, said Christ didn't meet the deadline last December for switching parties to run as a Democrat. Secretary of State Gale said, no, Christ at that time was registered as nonpartisan, and so he was joining a party, not switching parties.
Yeah, so on the ballot. Okay. Fred, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. During the session, listen to Fred's daily legislative updates on NET Radio at 5:45 and 7:45 a.m. and 5:45 p.m. and on our website at netnebraska.org/news. Well, did you know that World War II prisoners were housed in Nebraska? That story in this Nebraska History Moment.
During World War II, thousands of prisoners of war were held in internment camps in the United States. Nebraska was a site for several where prisoners would be safely confined and used to supplement a depleted civilian workforce. In November 1943, the first group of 600 German POWs arrived at Fort Robinson to maintain the fort and its thousands of horses. There were 5 base camps in Nebraska, from Scottsbluff to Fort Crook and Omaha, and as many as 20 branch camps. Germans and Italians were commonly housed in Nebraska. Some even returned to the state after release to begin new lives after the war. Although the war with Germany ended in May 1945, the last few POWs and American camp personnel did not leave Fort Robinson until May 1946. It remains one of the country's best preserved prisoner of war camp sites.
Well, that's all for this edition of Speaking of Nebraska. We're off the next couple weeks, but starting March 22nd, Speaking of Nebraska will be back for another 5 weeks. NET reporters Bill Kelly and Grant Gerlach will take over the hosting duties to bring you interviews on subjects like free speech, the death penalty, and trade. Thanks for joining us. Good night.